So it would seem that in my haste to upload another Godzilla 2014 video, I may have missed a few tiny details. This is why I love you guys. When old Jester misses a point or two, you guys are the collective slap in the back of the head I desperately need. So let's take another look at that Golden Gate Bridge scene. Now, I will admit, I fell in a trap here. By this point in the movie, I had become so starved for monster action that I was blinded to a few elements that, when you take a step back, become glaringly obvious. So let's talk logistics. Do you know how high it is from San Francisco Bay to the road on the bridge?
I don't know.
220 feet. That's about 37 Christopher Walkens.
Oh, wow.
Also, the water beneath the bridge reaches depths up to 370 feet. About 62 Christopher Walkens for those of you keeping track at home.
Wowee.
So basically, from bottom of the bay to the bridge, it's nearly 600 feet, or 100 Christopher Walkens.
Wow! Oh, wowee, wow, wow, wow!
However, Godzilla stands only at a mere 59 Christopher Walkens, or 355 feet after adjusting for conversion. You know what that means? This shit can't happen. Godzilla rising above the bridge and grasping onto its suspension cables is logistically impossible. Dude would need a serious vertical leap to even find himself touching the net on this one. I want to thank the fan who pointed this out. Aleph X, or Aleph X. Aleph X? See, I asked how to pronounce his name and I still fucked this up. The point is, he's a nice guy who makes good points and also makes me look bad at my job. How did I miss this? Godzilla is in apex predator mode, trying to hunt down the vermin who killed his people. And along the way, he stops by the bridge to do what? He just kinda hangs out there for a moment until he's hammered through the bridge, and then he disappears.
You want to run that by me again?
After its initial attack, he, disappeared.
Firstly, there is no point to him attacking the bridge. As the kind man said, he could have just kept sailing right past the bridge without giving it a second thought. I guess the sightseer in him just couldn't resist. Those Japanese and their cameras. Then again, this could be an homage by the writers. Godzilla does seem to have this tendency to needlessly destroy bridges and elevated roads. Even his first rampage ended with a needless bridge destruction scene. That last part always stuck with me since I was a kid. You know, I understand burning down the city as a whole, but going out of your way to destroy this random bridge on the way out always felt like a dick move. That's some bully shit right there. Maybe Godzilla vs. Kong was more accurate than I thought. Speaking of repetitive dickery, there is something I've noticed in these films. It's subtle, but it appears that Godzilla has developed another incredible ability. Ready? Godzilla, king of the monsters, can vanish or reappear based on what the plot needs from him. Don't believe me? King of the monsters. Godzilla's in front of Ghidorah, he's behind him. Godzilla vs. Kong. Godzilla carves into the hollow earth while Kong's climbing up. Godzilla disappears during the interim. Later on, Godzilla defeats Kong, then he turns around and gone till daylight. Now here we are again. Godzilla attacks the bridge and just as the Muto arrives. You remember the Muto, right? His main target, the reason why he's here? Now just to clarify the order of events in the film. Godzilla attacks the bridge, then the camera pans away. After that, the Muto attacks the boat and steals the nuke. The male and female meet up and begin working on their nest. We cut to Brody sitting through a briefing for the upcoming Halo jump. It's only after Serizawa finally gives permission.
Let them fight.
Do the monsters actually meet each other in battle? So, where was Godzilla all this time? Based on stature alone, he could probably see these monsters clear as day from the bay. So why the delay? Now you may say, the military got in his way, but considering they get EM paid, fuck, I ruined it. Point is, the EMP would render the military useless. So, where is he? Let's be real. Godzilla has vanished from the film because the writers had nothing for him to do, and didn't respect him enough as a character, instead treating him as a plot device. I think that's one of the major things that's always turned me off about this movie. Godzilla is not the focus of the film that bears his name. What with the cutting away and complete lack of acknowledgement of where he is, why he's doing what he's doing, or even whether it's possible for him to do it. I mean, you could saturate the color palette all you want, I still don't think you're taking things seriously. This is something I don't explicitly attribute to Gareth Edwards, as it seemed he had a vision for this film that was ultimately denied by the real culprit, the studio. Whenever I see this kind of inexplicable nonsense going on in my Godzilla films, I always picture some suit with a stick up his ass and no knowledge of the source material, advocating for creative changes most likely inspired by secondhand research. It always feels like the studio's priority is checking boxes rather than creating an entertaining product. The age-old compromise between art and business. Time to discuss one of the most memorable sequences in the entirety of the Monsterverse. The Halo jump. Who doesn't remember seeing this in the trailer and being absolutely sold on the movie? Aesthetics alone, the scene is beautiful tension and suspense. But before we get to the jump itself, cut to the mission briefing between Ford, Admiral Stenz, Wayne from Letterkenny, and pre-op Captain America. Let's break this down. The Muto has acquired the nuke and brought it to the center of the city, jeopardizing the lives of 100,000 civilians. With the Muto's EMP frying all electrical components within a 5-mile radius, and I guess horses not being an option, the military has opted to drop paratroopers from near orbit, hopefully out of range of the EMP. Now these men will have to drop into this literal hellscape between the clash of ancient gods, hopefully not hitting anything on the way in. Now if the plane hasn't been EMP'd and they're lucky enough to hit the ground, they will only have a small window of time to scour the entirety of Chinatown for the bomb, which, as Serizawa explains, may be hidden underground. Now if they are somehow able to find this needle in a haystack with whatever troops may remain, they then have to hope the bomb can even be defused after all the abuse it's taken. If it can't be disarmed, their contingency is to bring it to the docks, where they can hopefully find a working boat and send it out to sea. Bear in mind, there is no extraction plan. This is essentially a one-way trip, a suicide mission. This is also why I wish they'd gotten Elle out of the city first. I mean, I understand keeping her in the city so there's a tangible thing motivating Ford in stopping the bomb, but there's only so many times I can see her narrowly dodging debris before it gets old. In my opinion, they should have had Ford briefly see his family before he takes the big jump. Have a quick emotional scene where he reunites with his family before he has to do his duty to his country, and possibly give himself closure in dealing with the monsters that killed his parents. I'd like this mission to be his chance to overcome his childhood trauma, rather than an obligation to save his sister wife. I think it'd be more impactful for his character to choose this mission, rather than it being forced upon him. Also, considering the heroism and bravery all these men are displaying in boarding this plane, I wish we got even a small moment where we can humanize them even slightly. I keep thinking of the first episode of Band of Brothers, where all the paratroopers are boarding the planes, about to embark upon the great journey they've been training for these many months. Even though we've had some time to flesh out these characters, if we were to isolate this scene, where we see the faces of these brave men swallowing their fear, steeling themselves for the battle ahead, the risk of their mission becomes much more impactful. Seeing the men on the ground watching as the planes lift off makes you feel the weight of all that's at stake and how many people depend upon their success. That scene really helps elevate the significance of what's about to transpire. In this movie, we don't really get a moment like that. It's not a deal breaker for me, but it does bother me that they filmed a scene like this and cut it out.
Gentlemen, you are being sent in via Halo jump. Now, I realize not all of you have had hands-on experience.
It was probably cut for time, but considering how well it worked in the trailer, I'm surprised they didn't keep it. Who doesn't love a rousing speech before a big mission? In fact, I'm surprised we didn't even get a brief conversation on the plane. I mean, if there were ever a time for an inconsequential Morales-type character, it'd be now, where I really want to hear what's going through Ford's head. I mean, he's sitting there holding a picture of his family. It totally invites conversation on a suicide mission.
I want to slip my tube stick into your sister. What do you got?
I'd love to hear Ford just open up for a moment about how he feels about the loss of his family to these monsters and his journey throughout the film. Maybe a comment about this one-way trip being worth it if he could save his family. You know, something real, something to latch onto with him. Hell, you've got a comedy actor there. Why not have Letterkenny make a joke about how in terms of badass deaths, nukes or giant monsters are at the top of the list. Sure beats choking on a peanut or tripping on a skateboard. And I'm not talking a Harry Connick Jr. in Independence Day type of comic relief. Oh god, was that the worst.
Hold me.
Well, I got it right here. Yeah.
Gotcha, Big Daddy. Let's get him.
I don't know. I'd just like to feel anything for these characters before they're unceremoniously knocked down like dominoes. But the doors open, and the time comes. The men brace themselves and begin taking the plunge. What a truly amazing scene this is. Why couldn't we have gotten more like this from the Monsterverse? A tremendous suspenseful build, stunning visuals, and eerie soundtrack. This movie actually feels like a movie, not just a slideshow of exposition and CGI. I'm actually feeling something from this movie. Enjoy it while it lasts. Now, as cool as it is that Ford is dropping right past Godzilla, how does he not hear his roar? For some reason it's muffled. Shouldn't that be like incredibly audible, maybe even disruptive to someone who's flying past his head? Hell, I would have liked to have seen a wind gust from a Muto cause a few paratroopers to falter and crash into buildings. You want a hellscape? Show some chaotic death, like the opening scene from Future War. The soldiers touch down in the city, and immediately a tone of "the killer is inside the house" is set, as you see quick glimpses of the monsters and their shadows drift across buildings. Why couldn't the movie have begun with a flash forward to this scene? Imagine starting the next generation of Godzilla films with this level of tension and investment. Now the soldiers begin regrouping, and move on the nuke's location. However, I can't help but notice that Ford is just kinda there. He has no dialogue, and is being completely overshadowed by Letterkenny. It feels like Ford should be the one calling the shots here, right? Like, chain of command aside, he's earned being the one in charge by being our main character. It's kinda weird to just see him fall in line with a group of nameless, faceless grunts when we spent so much time following his particular story. That's why I wanted them to either flesh out Letterkenny if he's going to take the lead, or simply start the movie here where Ford can begin as a grunt and then slowly develop into a more well-rounded character. To come this far just to take a back seat in the finale is a little lackluster. The soldiers arrive in the ruins of Chinatown and come upon the female Muto laying eggs. However, just as you begin to ask yourself, how the hell are they going to get past that? Now here's a cool Godzilla arrival. Shrouded in darkness, massive yet silent, and then that roar. Finding herself being called out, and with the male Muto seemingly indisposed, I guess, the female stops giving birth to meet Godzilla in battle. Then again, is it really that easy to just stop giving birth on a dime? I thought stopping a piss midstream was difficult. This bitch has about 1,000 eggs backed up in her. But she's gonna have to yo-yo that litter for a bit, because Godzilla's coming full force, grabbing her by the throat and taking her to class. With the monsters distracted, the soldiers move in on the nest, where they find hundreds upon hundreds of eggs. They get the nuke down and then try for 3 seconds to open it up before moving it to the docks. You can tell Ford is visibly annoyed by this decision, because the fact they've given up on trying to defuse the bomb means he no longer has a purpose on this suicide mission other than monster fodder. Kinda shits on his whole character, to be honest. It honestly bothers me that we don't even get a word of protest from Ford on this decision. He doesn't even try to make a case for defusing the bomb here, rather than risking a search for an intact boat that may or may not exist. Let it be known, this whole contingency plan relies on that stroke of luck. With all the consideration they gave for the EMP during the Halo jump, it's bizarre they'd ultimately wind up putting their hopes in a vessel that's so incredibly vulnerable. Ford doesn't bring up this point. In fact, I took a look back on the film and get this. Between Ford leaving the mission briefing,
"Sir, I'll do whatever it takes,"
and the end of the film, Ford has only one real line of dialogue. Strap in, folks, here it comes.
Moving out, guys!
That's it. Aside from two minor exceptions I wouldn't even qualify as dialogue.
Sam.
Ford has only that single line for the entire finale of the film. If you ever wondered why you felt so disconnected from Ford as a character, look no further than that. In my opinion, they should have approached this in a John McClane type fashion. You'll notice throughout the Die Hard films that John McClane has a tendency to talk to himself, rationalizing events.
"I had the bastard in my sights. I know I did." Jesus Christ.
Psyching himself up for ridiculous stunts.
It's a bad idea.
And making jokes.
"Come out to the coast. We get together, have a few laughs."
We are given a window into his head and personality through these small human moments.
This once, like a regular, normal Christmas, but no! I had to crawl around this motherfucking tin can!
In fact, this is one of my favorite qualities in his character and would have worked wonders for Ford's. They even have a prime moment in a few minutes, where I was expecting some kind of McClane-esque remark. Ford's hammered to shit, and an even more hammered to shit Godzilla appears right next to him. The two look at each other and there's a moment where a good line would have been charming. Even something as simple as Ford looking at Godzilla and going, "Yeah, you and me both." You know, something. Anything. Fuck me, it's like they were on a mission to make Ford the most boring character on Earth. However, as a small respite, the writers allow him to make an actual choice and give him a meaningful purpose on this mission. And that is by making him the only guy who acknowledges that something has to be done about the eggs. How does that not occur to anyone else? I mean, you were looking for something designated a nest, right? So why not bring some explosive charges to destroy whatever you find? Even in Godzilla 98, they understood the importance of destroying a monster nest and not just leaving it to more interested parties. Speaking of interested parties, Ford doesn't even let his boys know that he's planning on destroying the nest, most likely attracting the attention of some very angry monsters. This fucking mime just abandons his unit and starts flooding the nest with gasoline. It's the smartest decision done in the dumbest way possible. Imagine if these dudes were one street over when this gigantic wailing mother came trampling through. Then what, Ford? Then you just have an even more damaged nuke covered in the strawberry jam that used to be your boys. Yeah, I'm kinda done talking about this asshole for a moment, so let's talk monsters. I think we should establish a timeline. Godzilla attacks the bridge, then disappears. He then reappears to fight the male Muto, in a battle that apparently lasts for several hours based on the time of day. This battle, in fact, every time Godzilla faces the male Muto solo, consists of the Muto grabbing Godzilla's face, then Godzilla biting his shoulder and tossing him away. I mean, it happens like 4 fucking times. Considering how long this particular fight is, I have a hard time believing the male Muto is still capable of flying. Imagine Godzilla's bite strength repeatedly crushing this thing's twiggy shoulder, but no damage is ever done on either side. The Muto grabs Godzilla's face, Godzilla throws the Muto away. Rinse and fucking repeat. Well, until... but we'll get to that. So after this hours-long battle, I guess the Hawk Muto flies away to nurse his mangled shoulders, leaving the Fem Muto vulnerable to a one-on-one. Now this is a very important battle, because this will be Godzilla's first true fight in the Monsterverse. So far these scuffles with the male Muto have just been dealing with a pest. The point is that this battle is important, because it sets the tone for Godzilla's fighting style. Over his tenure, Godzilla's personality and fighting style have changed, from being a close quarters combatant to an almost exclusively long-range devastator. The way in which he engages his enemies tells us how he views them, such as in Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster, where rather than trying to kill Hedorah initially, he instead tries to run him out of town, seeing him as a nuisance rather than a threat. Here, we get the opposite, as Godzilla grabs the Femmuto by the fucking throat, puts it on its back, and attempts to finish it with an atomic ray. At least I assume he's going for an atomic ray, based on his posture looking like an inhale. So, what does this tell us? Godzilla sees the Femmuto as a clear threat. Being they have an ancient rivalry, he may be aware of its ability to rapidly procreate. That means that unlike the Hawkmuto, which he treats as a nuisance, he considers the female to be the real threat. I can't tell you how happy it makes me that there's some kind of logic and inner workings to Godzilla's behavior. This isn't just monsters senselessly slapping their meat together. Godzilla's attempted coup de grace is interrupted by the Hawkmuto, which pesters Godzilla long enough for the Femmuto to turn the tables. Then we reach a moment in the film I'd been absolutely dreading. I'm not sure if there's a term for it, but I'll call it the vulnerable hero moment. Okay, so have you ever watched an 80s action movie where the main action guy is ripping through hordes and hordes of bad guys, cutting them down with a machine gun that never needs to reload, smoking a cigar and throwing out one-liners? Then the main bad guy comes out, and even if he's an old fogey, an out-of-shape businessman, or just some guy in a fishnet shirt, he's somehow the one dude who can actually land a hit on our hero. This becomes the moment where the hero is at his lowest and most vulnerable, a breath away from disaster. Yet, through some magical interference, they are able to recover and deal the final blow. That's what's happening here. That's what's happening already. The fight has only begun. Godzilla has landed only a single blow on the Femmuto, yet he is immediately overpowered and knocked down. The music gets all somber and choiry, and Godzilla's squealing like a bitch, and I'm sitting here thinking to myself, already? I've seen this moment so many times in Godzilla movies that on gut instinct, I knew the fight was at the home stretch. This is the low point that's going to lead into Godzilla having his second brain reconstituted, or have atomic lightning revive him, or magically gain Magneto powers. Whatever happens after this moment is going to be the end of the fight. The fight that just began. Fuck me. And not only that, but we get two of these moments. We get the somber music when Godzilla's getting ganged up on, and later when a skyscraper falls on him. These moments are big blaring signals that Godzilla's about to rally back and defeat his opponent. I wish I could say I was surprised. It seems the most creative thing they decided to do with these fights was a little biting and clawing. If that's all we're gonna get, how long could the fight be expected to last before it becomes boring and repetitive? I understand they're just trying to flesh out this new Godzilla, but how can you not be disappointed when a fight is so milquetoast and ends so quickly? Especially after waiting for this shit for 90 minutes, or a decade, based on how you want to look at it. Ford blows up the nest, causing the Femmuto to break off, while the male follows suit. Now, it's fairly common in Godzilla movies for the humans to lend the hero monster an assist every once in a while, and I'm glad that this time they went about it in a subtle way that makes sense narratively. The nest needed to be destroyed, and wasn't meant as an intentional distraction for the Muto. It was two events that happened to impact each other naturally, which sure as hell beats a nuke to the face or whiskey in a control panel. By the way, props for the way the Femmuto is portrayed as a grieving mother wailing towards its burning nest. This adds a level of empathy to a monster that easily could have come across as just another big baddie. This strong, independent Femmuto had hopes and aspirations. It dreamed of being a mother to a big bouncing brood. Now they're pulp. And that guy did it. That shit always gets me. So this huge explosion demolishes the whole area. Debris and ruins everywhere. Yet Ford knocks over a couple of shingles, and that somehow gets this monster's attention. Like, with all the flame and noise going on, That clatter of bricks somehow rings through clear as day. The Femmuto leans in, glaring it forward. However, a light appears behind her. I distinctly remember watching this moment in theaters and having been so detached from the movie at this point that I honestly forgot Godzilla could spit fire. Doesn't that speak volumes about how dirty they did my boy? I found this version of Godzilla so unrecognizable that I forgot his signature move. Now, people have pointed out that as the Monsterverse movies progressed, Godzilla's atomic ray changed its appearance, and I'm glad it did, because something about this ray just looks pitiful. How does fire look wet? Like, if Shin Godzilla's beam was a declaration, this beam is a mumbled suggestion. It lacks oomph. I like Godzilla's beam to be a statement. Robust. Precise. This looks like it tickles. However, I will give props to this scene for a couple of things. The camera angles are all from realistic locations a person might actually be. It helps ground this moment in reality, which is very important when dealing with a fire-breathing dragon. Also, a few exclamatory lines of the men on the ground add a greater sense of significance to this moment. Their shock and confusion lets us know that what they're seeing is even surprising in their universe. I wish I could describe this reaction in some form of coherent psychobabble, but just ask yourself, would this moment have felt as significant had the men on the ground given no reaction to Godzilla's atomic ray? They ultimately could have had these soldiers say nothing, but they chose to, and it adds something to this scene. I can't quite put my finger on the words for it, but I definitely say it's some type of movie magic at play. Now, Godzilla continues torching the Femmuto, until being interrupted by the Hawkmuto, which has just come back from another vanishing act. And the long-running dance of biting and clawing continues, whilst the Femmuto just kinda hangs out and waits to be relevant again. Now, at this point, Godzilla has been swatting at this fucking bug the whole movie. Why the fuck is he only now just breaking out the atomic ray? Godzilla has had 2 previous engagements with the Hawkmuto, the second lasting multiple hours. So why the fuck was he holding back that whole time? Wouldn't fire breath be the best choice for an opponent that keeps flying into your mouth? How much clawing, biting, and tossing before you go, enough already, and end this shit? Now, there is a case to be made that Godzilla sees the Femmuto as the real threat, and the Hawkmuto as more of a nuisance, as well as there being a narrative reason for having a big reveal of the atomic ray later in the film. However, Godzilla holding back on his signature move and never even using it on the opponent that's pestered him for this long just makes zero sense to me. However, all my annoyance melted away when I saw one of the greatest finishers I've ever seen in a kaiju film. The Uber Swat. Whoa! Tell me you didn't make an audible noise when you first saw this. That hit is one of the most solid hits in the franchise, and boy is it a fucking game ender. I even love that Godzilla has a fed up look on his face before he pops this off, like he's finally had it. Alright, one more time. Fucking... As Godzilla catches his breath, literally and quite humanly, the building he just installed the Hawkmuto in collapses, and buries him in what is now our second vulnerable hero moment. You know the fight's just about over. The rest of his squad has evacuated the bomb to a conveniently placed boat. They start it up, causing an alarm to blare, which alerts the Femmuto, who's just been hanging. She bears down on the fleeing soldiers, who set up defensive measures. Defensive measures being grouping up and firing dinky rifles at a monster that just survived the flamethrower of the gods. Long story short, doesn't go well. Strangely enough, their confidence to stay put may be explained by the fact that regular rifle bullets seem to have some type of effect on the Muto. She actually appears to be wincing. I gotta tell you, the actual effectiveness of rifles is not something you see commonly in Godzilla films, and I can only manage to remember a handful of occurrences. On a positive note, I will say that one of my favorite monster reactions in this film is when the Femudo takes that rocket to the face, pauses, and then turns with this "are you fucking kidding me" look. It always gives me a chuckle. However, what I find bothersome is that the other key soldiers, like Letterkenny and Pre-Op Captain America, have off-screen deaths. Based on when we last saw them, I'm pretty sure that was them on the boat, but we'll never know for sure, will we? I mean, Ford seems to have some type of reaction to these particular soldiers being wiped out, but can he really see them better than I can? I don't know. With the rest of the boys sacrificing themselves as a distraction, Ford manages to get aboard the boat. Good thing that, just like that train earlier, the Femudo has applied just the right amount of damage to it, wiping out the soldiers but not critically damaging the vessel itself. Just a couple extra foot-pounds of pressure per second. Ford starts up the ship and begins to cast off. An EMP completely shuts down the engines, leaving the boat adrift beneath a very angry-looking Femudo. However, I can't help but notice that this is the first and only time the Femudo uses an EMP, which is kind of odd. Much like its ability to fly, I thought the EMP would be an ability unique to the male of the species. I mean, personally, I think the EMP hurts this scene rather than helps it. It works cinematically where you think all is well until the lights suddenly shut off and everything goes silent. It definitely helps build the tension. However, the fact that when the Mudo is defeated, the EMP just becomes undone is so incredibly fucking distracting. Just have her chasing the boat. I mean, honestly, you're telling me this boat is so well made that it shakes off 2 EMPs in a monster swipe? At least after the first EMP, the soldiers had to hotwire the motherfucker. This second EMP is so ineffective that Ford doesn't even need to give it so much as a Fonzie tap. Anyway, the Mudo stops the boat dead in the water and looms over it. The Femudo leans in, and whether or not she recognizes Ford from the bridge or her liquefied offspring, it definitely seems like this one will be personal. However, as she once again attempts to gingerly eat Ford, he pulls his sidearm. Okay, listen. I know I've criticized a lot of dumb shit in this movie, but I'm willing to let this one go. Of course he's not gonna pop a cap in its ass and win the day. The handgun provides no chance at success, or even a feeling of minor security. Ford knows he's fucked, and in this moment we see that in the face of death, his fighting spirit still remains. I'd take this moment less as a lapse in logic, but a show of instinct. Stupid as it is, this moment actually has me rooting for Ford. I respect any son of a bitch who refuses to go quietly. And just as it appears to be all over,
Wowee!
fuck yeah. Fuck yeah! Alright, I think we can all agree, that was one of the best finishing moves of the entire series. Even if the entertainment quality of the fights themselves are in question, I can say with absolute certainty that this film knows how to kill a goddamn monster. So much so, that the next film would even try to up this kiss of death with hilariously awkward results. Capped off with that proud theme, we get the most badass roar of the Monsterverse. What's even more badass is that somebody's finally evoking some John McClane-like characteristics. And it's Godzilla! By defeating his opponent with epic finesse. And letting out a victory yell. Before collapsing in exhaustion. On the other side of things, Ford's about out of gas too. And you know what? It makes sense. Aside from the adrenaline of navigating all this monster nonsense, this dude was still thrown about 50 feet by a massive explosion, then hustled his shit all the way down to the docks and launched a boat solo. All the while making these awkward grunting noises. Like, it's so unnecessary. I feel like I'm watching that Mummy trailer where they released it before they finished the sound editing.
No.
Why is he doing that? Oh. Alright, so with a final... Ford finally collapses. His exhaustion is believable. I'm so sick of the trope of action guys who have unlimited stamina and shake off explosions like autumn breezes.
I can't hear! Oh my god, how do they walk away in movies without flinching when it explodes behind them? There's no way! I need an MRI!
Our boy's pooped, and is powerless to stop the boat, now that its autopilot is taking the bomb out to sea. Seemingly accepting his fate, Ford lies back and waits for the final 5 to run out. By the way, I can't help but recall one of my major complaints about the final battle in King of the Monsters being that it had a 12-minute timer.
Godzilla's radiation levels are going through the roof. We got about 12 minutes before it goes thermonuclear.
12 minutes felt way too short. However, this film graciously gave us almost half an hour, which is plenty of breathing room. That's a healthy amount of time for a good climax. However, the clock's now at 5 minutes, and within this 5 minutes, a rescue chopper will come upon Ford, scoop him up, and escape the blast radius of an atomic bomb. Listen, maybe Batman could do it. Maybe. But Ford ain't Batman. I don't believe this window of time for him to be rescued in this manner. I'm pretty sure even with a skyhook, you'd be cutting it close with this blast radius. This is a thought that has bothered me from the moment I saw it in theaters, and now you can take it home with you. Don't even worry about returning the Tupperware. Now for dessert.
Dessert.
A little hypothetical. Let's for a moment imagine if Ford's mission had failed, and the nuke had gone off in San Francisco. Godzilla probably would have survived, but the Mutos would have been decimated, along with all their offspring. At the cost of San Francisco, that's not too shabby. However, the nuke would have also obliterated a few other pests, the Russell family. Think about that. That means that Emma would have never finished the Orca, meaning there'd be no way for Tywin to raise Ghidorah in King of the Monsters, which means Ghidorah wouldn't be able to execute Order 66 and begin the Kaiju uprising. Isla Damara would still be here. Sarazawa would still be here. How many millions, nay billions, would have been saved if only Ford had just told his wife to leave the fucking city and met up with her in fucking Oakland? Whatever it takes, right? How about a little common sense, asshole? God damn it, I wish the nuke had gone off. What the fuck is wrong with me? This is a victory. I should be happy Ford made it through. Way to go, champ. Too bad he doesn't even get so much as an attaboy from anyone. I mean, he meets up with his family in a few minutes, and there is much rejoicing. But then he has to witness an entire stadium of people cheer on this giant lizard asshole who drowned half of Hawaii yesterday. Savior of our city? Debatable. If I were Ford, I'd be looking around like, am I a joke to you? I mean, this firefighter's laughing at him. What the fuck? Seriously though, Ford is the lone survivor of a group of men who sacrificed everything for this city. He's been heroic in 3 time zones, and yet Godzilla, the dog-drowning bridge smasher, is soaking up the glory. You know, someone mentioned that Ford got a Navy ship named after him in the DC battle or something, but is that really enough compensation? They should rename this city San Ford Cisco, the city of sisterly love. Yeah, well, let's hope Ford's got plenty of that in his future. Our boy's earned it. But what of Godzilla? Initially thought to be dead, he is completely surrounded by people when he wakes up. How are people that comfortable walking right next to him? I mean, I'm surprised some kids weren't using him as a bike ramp. I mean, besides the fact that he's, you know, Godzilla, Don't you think the radiation should also be a concern? Didn't you see Chernobyl? Blowing atomic rays like that, I'm sure he's given off more than 3.6 Rontgen. But nah, it's all good. Godzilla finally comes to and shuffles out of the city. He lets out one final roar and returns to the ocean, disappearing beneath the waves. But his great mass causes another tsunami to surge ashore. A rescue effort turns into a massacre, bodies strewn about! Directed by Gareth Edwards.
There we go. That was an ordeal.
So, what was this movie? What was its objective? Well, it's a reboot, so one would assume that its intent would be to set up the next saga in the Godzilla franchise. Therefore, I think the fair way to assess this film would be to compare it to the other reboots in the series, such as The Return of Godzilla and Shin Gojira, as well as the glorious original. Now, at a glance, the first thing that sets Godzilla 2014 apart from the rest is that it does not have Godzilla antagonistic towards humans. The furthest the other reboots ever got was Godzilla 2000, which made him out to be more of an anti-hero, since he's considered a threat, but is inside every one of us. At 10 years old in the theater, that line gave me my first documented case of douche chills.
Godzilla is inside each one of us.
I'll be right here.
This film chooses to have humanity celebrate Godzilla by the end, though all he really does is beeline to an enemy, kill it, and walk away. That doesn't really make him a hero. It honestly doesn't tell us anything about him, except he's indifferent at best, and at worst, obligated to fulfill the responsibility of bringing balance to nature. Exciting stuff. Of course, this most likely has to do with America not embracing Godzilla's nuclear roots, most likely out of embarrassment for having been the ones who dropped the bomb in the first place. I just want to say that, on a personal level, I'm glad we nuked Japan in World War II. I am so sick of American guilt over the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. People have this idea that we were these big American bullies who needlessly dropped a weapon we fully understood on an undeserving Japanese populace. Fuck that. First of all, they started it with their territorial expansion and the attack at Pearl Harbor. But after the Battle of Midway, where we eliminated their aircraft carriers along with their offensive capabilities, the Japanese dug in on the islands around their homeland. As the Americans fought island by island, the Japanese got more and more desperate.
Japs fighting for their own turf now. Every damn foot we go south, they'll get meaner and meaner. You better get mean too, boo.
That's where we start seeing more bonsai charges and kamikaze attacks. Just watch the show The Pacific, the companion piece to Band of Brothers, if you want to get an idea of what the Japanese were capable of. The Japanese would rather die horribly than bring dishonor to their homeland and emperor. Imagine an enemy that has no regard for its own well-being. By the time we were in position to invade their homeland, American casualty projections were well over 1 million. The Japanese had begun training every man, woman, and child to use whatever they could to kill as many Americans as possible. Pointed sticks, big rocks, dog shit, and a wrist rocket. Hell, they were even going to have men in diving suits blowing themselves up underneath the American landing craft. That's the enemy the American forces would have had to have faced had it not been for the development of a new type of weapon, the atomic bomb. Now, it bothers me that people think we fully knew the ramifications of nuclear fallout at the time, and what it would do to the Japanese populace. Hell, you can find footage from the 50s, where the American military was trying a tactic where they detonate a nuke and send in completely unprotected infantry. They gave their own men lethal doses of radiation because they didn't know any better.
This white badge, can you tell me what that is?
That's a film badge to determine, detect the amount of radiation you've received in the area.
And they can tell from that if you received a lethal dose.
That's right. That's right, they can.
Hell, they used to put this shit in makeup so your bitch's lips would glow in the dark.
Bomb exploded in a harbor might affect a city. The affected area would be a poor picnic site.
What I'm saying is the atomic bomb was just another in a long line of weapons that we were throwing at the Japanese, and it still took 2 of them motherfuckers for them to finally give in. We all think of how many lives the bombs claimed, but compared against what an invasion of the Japanese homeland may have looked like, who knows how many lives the bombs saved. In that context, I personally have no qualms over our use of atomic weapons in the Second World War. However, since America has become a self-hating apologist, we couldn't have Godzilla be a reminder of our past sins, completely forgetting he's the literal manifestation of them. Since we're talking history, there's another event that's integral to Godzilla's character, and that is the story of the Lucky Dragon No. 5, a Japanese fishing vessel that in 1954 found itself in the fallout of nearby American nuclear testing. The Castle Bravo nuclear test delivered a blast twice as big as expected, sending radioactive fallout well outside the designated safe zone. The 23 sailors aboard the Lucky Dragon witnessed the sky turn red, followed by a snowfall of radioactive ash, which would later be referred to by the crew as Death Ash. These men didn't understand the danger, taking over 6 hours to reel in their gear, process their fish, and begin the week-long journey home. The ash got all over their clothes and their underwear, they touched it with their bare hands, one dude even tasted the shit! Jesus, you may as well have been making snow angels in it! So as they weathered rough seas back to port, they started experiencing the effects of radiation poisoning. Their hair fell out, their faces darkened, and they started sprouting lesions, also known as keloid scars. As a matter of fact, Godzilla's skin is supposed to be akin to those scars, as he himself is a victim of radiation. That's why his head is also shaped like a mushroom cloud in the first film. Now, the Japanese public was horrified by this event, and of course the Americans took no responsibility for what had happened. As for the crew of the Lucky Dragon No. 5, one died in hospital, whilst the others all developed diseases associated with radiation poisoning. Cancer, cirrhosis of the liver, all that fun stuff. They were even denied the same medical coverage the survivors of the previous atomic bombs were provided. Imagine that shit, not getting hit by the right atomic bomb. This event was fresh in the minds of the Japanese people, when the first Godzilla film hit theaters only 8 months later. And as you remember, the film begins with a Japanese vessel being destroyed by Godzilla's atomic ray. In fact, almost every reboot in the franchise begins with Godzilla interacting with a boat. That's not a coincidence. Now think about this film, with a plot that doesn't involve Godzilla till Jesus Christ, what a fucking 12-year-old I am. Now think about this film, with a plot that doesn't involve Godzilla till nearly halfway through. It's honestly ponderous to me that we would forego tradition and instead begin the film with a backstory for a character that's never again addressed. The final act of this film has no real connection to the first, except that Mutos like nuclear energy. That's about it. However, the first part of this film does do something akin to the other films, and that is making a connection to a real-life event. In the first film, it was the Lucky Dragon and the bombing of Japan. In Return of Godzilla, it was the Cold War and man's reckless use of nuclear weapons. In Shin Gojira, it was the Tohoku tsunami and the criticisms of the government's response. In this film, it's the Fukushima nuclear disaster, which resulted from that same tsunami. The problem is that the reactor disaster in this film has nothing to do with Godzilla. It's just where Ford's mom works. Sure, it's where the Amuto initially sets up shop, but without an underlying nuclear message to the film, it's more member berries than something of meaningful narrative relevance. I guess you could make a case that this film has a theme of reckless atomic weapon use, especially since the entire finale relies on the military's plan involving a nuclear weapon going predictably awry. However, it doesn't really say anything about Godzilla or his character. So, just to recap, the traditional Godzilla reboot features the titular monster right off the bat, contains a link to a real-life event, and has an underlying theme about the dangers of nuclear weapons. This film doesn't hit any of those beats. And this is the crux of the character. Batman has to watch his parents die. Spider-Man has to watch Uncle Ben take a fat one. Godzilla needs to have a nuclear origin. It's that simple, yet the film couldn't commit. And it's not even just the commitment to Godzilla's nuclear roots, but really any kind of insight to his purpose as a character. This movie tells us he's just always been around, waiting for something to happen. And now something's happening. That's exciting. So back to the question of what was this film's objective? To establish what this new Godzilla is. Plainly, they failed. They took out what defines him as a character and replaced it with filibuster. They took the time that would normally be spent defining Godzilla's origins and purpose and replaced it with a backstory to a character with no payoff. Really, all they had to do was have Ford hate the Muto, have his interest in destroying it be personally motivated by his dead parents, and celebrate their demise. But we're denied that too. This film also does nothing in terms of world building for the series as a whole. Its events are forgotten by the other films and never mentioned again. Honestly, if King of the Monsters had instead begun with a scene where Godzilla shows up out of nowhere fighting a monster in San Francisco, you could have removed this film entirely. It provides nothing else of value to the overall series. All it gives us is Serizawa, whose big claim to fame is that he said, "let them fight" in the trailer, and the other takeaway being the concept of balance, which is never meaningfully explored and is totally irrelevant by Godzilla vs. Kong. At the end of the day, if I had to sum up this film, I would say this. Godzilla 2014 was an underdeveloped misfire that either didn't understand or lacked the commitment to meaningfully revitalize an iconic character. It's the introduction to a saga that ultimately forgets its existence and only serves to set the tone for the muddled, half-baked nature of the Monsterverse. It is devoid of nearly all the elements a fan of the character would be looking for in a Godzilla film. And above all else, it's just plain boring. Wowie, wow, wow. Yet, the fans cheered, and I envied them. I wish I could just sit back and enjoy the ride, but with all these thoughts swimming through my head, it's nearly impossible. It seems like these days, people are pushed to blindly praise whatever nonsense falls off the back of a truck. Being honest and critical sometimes feels like you're pushing back against the tide. But I'd be lying if I said it wasn't fun. I've really enjoyed putting together these reviews and trying to give you guys something special. Not just babbling about what shouldn't be, but arguing what could have been. Spending the last few years making these Godzilla reviews, I scarcely came across anyone in my daily life who took interest in the videos I've come to be so proud of. Makes sense. It's a niche interest. Honestly, it's you guys that make it all worthwhile. I see your comments, and I feel your support. Thank you. Here's hoping we continue this journey together. See you next time.